This week on Capital Connection, early voting officially starts ahead of the November election.
Doors opening right at 8 o'clock for us. Had a nice little line, and it's been a consistent flow of voters since then.
And as the campaign trail heats up, so does the rhetoric around immigration. Lisa Wilson with the Refugee Center in Champaign joins us to talk about the potential impacts.
Well, certainly the negative rhetoric doesn't help people who are very desperately in need of everything from housing to food.
And a local group is looking to continue a long-standing tradition here in Springfield. We tell you how you can nominate somebody in your life to be Springfield's first citizen.
There's a nomination button. It's pretty easy. Go fill it out.
It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol reporter Cole Hankey is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Cole Hankey. Early voting is officially open here in Illinois, and both election officials and candidates are expecting a continuation of the trend of more people casting their votes early, whether it be through mail or in person. The focus on early voting has sped up the campaign trail for candidates, especially those in down-ballot races who now really have to make sure that their name is out there. More and more people are casting their votes through mail or in person before Election Day, a trend that is staying consistent since COVID.
Votes have definitely moved in terms of when to start.
You may have to hit those voters a couple more times, and then once early voting starts like it has today, you really want to keep up that momentum and the voter contact the next 5 weeks until Election Day.
We're now joined by Sangamon County Clerk Don Gray to continue our discussion about early voting. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, we're talking to you. This is Thursday morning. The polls just opened up. You opened your doors to everybody. How's it been going so far this morning?
Yeah, pretty exciting. Really surprised. From the get-go of the doors opening right at 8 o'clock for us, had a nice little line, and it's been a consistent flow of voters since then. So it's a really great indicator that people are prepared, passionate, and ready to be able to cast their ballots.
Is that line you're talking about, and it may not be, it's not out the door or anything like that, but has that line been there in previous years, or are we seeing that greater focus on people just getting in and voting early?
Yeah, I think that we've established procedural policy of pre-election day services to cast ballots at an extremely great level here in Illinois. And I think more and more are exposed to it, more and more are utilizing it. They're realizing that it's the great convenience, that it's done securely, that it's done well in each jurisdiction. And why not use it if you know that you've already decided upon who you want to vote for? So it's a nice efficiency measure for the authority. We're getting people into the queue earlier and quicker in terms of casting their ballots, and voters are taking care of their civic responsibility.
The last presidential election we had was right in the middle of the pandemic, and we saw a huge focus on vote by mail, mainly to keep those crowds away from the polling centers, keep everybody safe. And we saw a lot of people register for that. Are we seeing that continuation of that trend?
Yeah, it's been an amazing transformation of the manner in which ballots are being cast, at least in Sangamon. I believe that to be the case statewide for my colleagues. Since the pandemic, this very high level of exposure of folks that utilize the vote by mail program, the legislature, the governor signing the authorization for a permanent vote by mail list where you only need to enroll once with no changes to your address or name. We're seeing a steady progression of buildup from each cycle to cycle. In Sangamon County, we're seeing about a 20% enrollment increase from each cycle. That's pretty dramatic for us. We're close now to almost a quarter of ballots cast that will be cast in a presidential election already being sent out and mailed in the permanent list. If we stay on that trend, it's going to be pretty remarkably changing the manner in which we operate our elections moving forward.
Would you have, before 2020, would you have ever imagined those numbers were getting to that big, that the public would embrace this in this way?
Yeah, not even close. The excitement and the focus was on providing for the opportunity for the early voting facilities. We were thinking more bricks and mortar and structure and where people can go and, be amongst other voters in the community, kind of the moment of the day within the cycle. This concept of what we were forced upon where we couldn't be close to each other in social framework in the middle of a major election really precipitated this, doing it more private and amongst your home. And it was really well received in Sangamon County by our voters, and they continue to keep coming back. They know that we treat the product well, we're securing it, we're validating the integrity of the election, and we're getting it done with an accurate tabulated result.
Going off of that, I know last year, around this time, county clerks from across the state really started to talk about the vote-by-mail process and try to educate people on it so they understood it. There's been a lot of attacks on it. And I wonder with you, just broadly, talking about all different kinds of early voting, is there more of a focus this year on that educational component to make sure people understand exactly how this process is working?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's been a big part of the job of the election authority over the last couple cycles of election. There certainly has been much more scrutinization, analyzation of how we operate in the election administration world. And we welcome that scrutiny. We welcome that analyzation. It makes us sharper and better at what we do. It helps us craft our procedural policy that how we're operating and what we're doing is uniform, and it's understandable, and people have confidence in it. The whole thing we're looking for is the confidence of knowing that it's being done correct, it's accurate, it's transparent, it's accountable, it can be proved. And certainly in educating the public has come a long way in doing that. I encourage anyone who has doubts, talk to your election authority, talk to those trusted officials, go take an election judge class, come to the authority and get a exposure to how it is that we validate vote by mail. We're all welcome to do that. We want to have everybody focused on how it's getting done correctly to have confidence that when it's a finalized result, it's accurate to how votes were cast.
Don, I'll let you get back to the office. I know you got a line foreman over there, so thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at some of the big topics that are being talked about on the campaign trail. We'll be right back.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. As the campaign trail has heated up, so has the rhetoric around immigration, both across the country and here in Illinois. The Trump campaign has made it even more of a central focus over the past month, and with a month left in this campaign cycle, it's only expected to be more of a conversation. And here in Illinois, members of the Freedom Caucus have really started to push a new bill that would increase penalties for non-citizens both registering to vote and actually casting a ballot. The problem is the penalties that they want to raise this threshold to still fall lower than penalties that are already established at the federal law. This has led Governor Pritzker to call this merely an election year stunt.
That's just a stunt. That's something leading into the November election they'd like to raise, but we have no signs that there are people that are voting or have been over any of the last bunch of elections in Illinois who are non-citizens.
We are now joined by Lisa Wilson, the Executive Director of the Refugee Center in Champaign. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we've really seen over the past few weeks, since the last presidential debate, we've seen immigration become even more of a contentious point on the campaign trail, I guess to say, than we have even before then. And I'm just curious, when this starts to happen, when the rhetoric really ramps up and the rhetoric gets stronger on the one side, there's more of that othering of immigrants across the state. I'm curious what kind of impact you see on the ground level for an organization that's helping people find and establish themselves in a community.
Well, certainly the negative rhetoric doesn't help people who are very desperately in need of everything from housing to food to education. They're in a vulnerable position, and the kind of rhetoric we're hearing just makes their situation worse.
Is that just noticeable, like in the work you do and the work your organization does, in just the regular lives that people may be trying to live? I mean, is this just, does this permeate that work right away? Is it just visible for you?
Well, I'll give you an example. One of the programs that the Refugee Center offers is refugee resettlement for refugees and special immigrant visa holders who are coming from outside of the country. They've been through the refugee admission program, they've been vetted, they've been approved. But when they get here, we initiate something called cultural orientation. And one of the subjects we have to cover is that our clients in the US do not need to be afraid of government officials or the police. Many of them are coming from countries where they did have to fear the government or fear police. So when you have this negative rhetoric against immigrants, it only increases that fear that they have because they've escaped a position where they felt threatened. So it really makes our work harder.
There's this larger conversation. Obviously, there's been an influx in immigrants coming from the southern border, and there's the conversation around why that is happening. But often what we've seen on the campaign trail is an almost villainization of the people coming across the border. I'm just curious what you see as the way to kind of push back against this broader rhetoric we're seeing, nationwide.
Well, there have been a couple events that have happened in communities around central Illinois. And I know there was a controversy about having the city of Danville support this, the SMAS, what we call the SMAS grant, the supporting municipalities assisting southern border arrivals. And that was a grant that had to be sponsored by a governmental organization. So I found it really interesting to see how that kind of devolved into this misinformation. Essentially, what that grant was doing was trying to support cities that were going to welcome some of these southern border arrivals and try and reduce the concentration of the southern border arrivals from Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. Immigrants contribute to an economy just by purchasing things. We have a sales tax in this state. And once they get workers authorization, then they're contributing even more to the economy. So I really don't understand the negative rhetoric. I know in Decatur, one of the representatives there introduced a bill to criminalize organizations that register non-citizens to vote. And it actually made me kind of chuckle because those of us who are involved with immigration advocacy know that that is the worst possible thing we could do for our clients. In fact, we encourage them to be on the lookout for any kind of documentation or forms that they fill out so that they don't mistakenly register to vote. I believe the Decatur lawmakers cited Oregon's DMV as they mistakenly registered non-citizens to vote. And that's something that we warn our clients about. If you go get your state ID, if you're getting your driver's license, make sure you are not automatically registering to vote. It could have disastrous consequences for your immigration status.
All right. Well, Lisa Wilson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at a few other headlines coming out of the Capitol this week. The first, actually, we're going to head to Chicago for because the Chicago White Sox are wrapping up what very well might be one of the worst seasons in MLB history. But even though they're struggling to win on the field, they're still hoping to win here in the Capitol. The White Sox and the Chicago Bears are still pushing for state taxpayer dollars to help fund new stadiums in Chicago. The lawmakers here in the Capitol, including the legislative leaders and Governor Pritzker, are holding the line that they set last spring. Last spring, the Chicago Bears and the Chicago White Sox chose an already difficult budget year to ask for state tax dollars to help build new stadiums. Governor Pritzker and the legislative leaders like Senate President Don Harmon didn't like the idea then.
Look, I'm as big a sports fan as the next guy. and I'm always happy to listen to ideas, but I made it clear to them then, and have tried to make it clear in the media since, that there's next to no appetite to fund a new stadium with taxpayer dollars.
And they have not faltered from that stance publicly since. The conversation is expected to continue at the Capitol into this spring, but it's an uphill battle for both teams.
It was a great presentation on their part. What the reality is we still represent the taxpayers of the state of Illinois. They have to change the environment to convince the taxpayers of the state of Illinois that it's a good idea that taxpayers fund a new stadium.
Earlier this month, the White Sox, in the midst of what could be the worst season in MLB history, hosted lawmakers for an event at their stadium. Afterwards, House Speaker Chris Welch said it did not change his views.
But the reality is how do you pay for it? And, I think it would be a great economic development piece for the city of Chicago. The question is who should pay for it? And I think the developers should probably spend some time seeing if there's some private investment they'd be interested in.
Governor Pritzker's chief of staff took to X on Monday to reiterate the governor's stance, saying voters have been, quote, amazingly consistent on the idea of taxpayer-funded stadiums. And she said the governor's stance is the same, saying, quote, show him significant, tangible return for the investment to the taxpayer. And the legal battle continues between the state and banks. If you remember, back last spring, the state cut a last-minute deal with retail merchants to help balance the budget in exchange for lowering the amount of money that retailers get for collecting sales taxes. They made it so those swipe fees you get on your credit card are no longer taxed, helping both retailers and, they say as well, the consumers. But bankers have said that this is going to lead to mass confusion and possibly more than one swipe when you're using your credit card to pay. But this week, the Retail Merchants Association came forward with polling data trying to say that they're winning in the court of public opinion. The Illinois Retail Merchants Association commissioned a poll to show support for the plan. It found 85% supported the state's move.
Retailers should not have to pay a fee on a tax they are collecting for the state and units of local government or on the tips consumers leave for team members.
In a joint statement, the Illinois Bankers Association and the Illinois Credit Union Association dismissed the poll, saying, quote, today's poll and press conference from the retailers was nothing more than a smokescreen. The survey clearly failed to inform consumers that this law will cause chaos every time they use a credit or debit card, and no amount of spin from the retailers will change that. When we come back, we sit down with a group that is trying to keep a long-standing tradition here in Springfield alive, the Springfield First Citizen. We'll be right back.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Now, we spent today's show talking about the upcoming election and the importance of the choices on it, but we also have another important choice coming up here in Springfield, the choice for who will be the next first citizen of Springfield. Joining us now is one of the men that's helping lead this effort in town. It's Pat Phelan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So I know that this is kind of taking a little bit of a different approach this year to First Citizen, or a shake-up on the organization a little bit, but applications are open now. How do people go about nominating, people they may know in their lives that are deserving?
It's so easy. We have a website, firstcitizenaward.org. There's a nomination button. It's pretty easy. Go fill it out. Find somebody in your life that you know does good works. Not necessarily the person who was paid to do it. We're not trying to honor the best executive director of an organization. We want the volunteer. We want the person who just does things, who helps raise money for their church or their school or their community in general. People that are just out there trying to help others.
And with this, that application you're talking about, how long do they have? How long, you mentioned they're looking for the volunteer. what is the ideal circumstance for this? Do they have to live in Springfield, or is it Sangamon County? What are the parameters here?
Yeah, we call it Greater Springfield area. Would prefer probably to be Sangamon County, but there's really no restriction on that. Applications are open today through October 15th. Very easy to apply. We just want to put the word out. This program started in 1963. It was part of the Copley newspaper. At the time, there were 2 papers here in town, and they decided to honor the citizens of Springfield who do great work. And the first honoree was a lady by the name of Harriet Knudsen, and she was part of the Lincoln Memorial Garden. She stood that thing up. Last year, we had Patricia Benanni, who's been the spine and the bones and the soul of St. Martin de Porres. Year before that, we had Evelyn Brandt Thomas, who, happy birthday, Evelyn, just turned 101 just in the last month. She's given her adult life to helping organizations in her community. And before that was Catherine Harris, who has spent decades with civil rights organizations and historical preservation initiatives. So, and the list goes on and on. We could sit here and talk your entire show about the people that have been on this list, the people that have been nominated, the people that have won. And really it's inspiring. It's not just about them and what they've done. Hopefully it inspires the rest of us to do more. When you see some of these nominations come through and you see what these people have done, you look at yourself and go, I could do more. And that's what this is all about. It's not just to honor those that have done great work. It's to inspire others.
If you apply to have somebody selected this year and they don't get that first citizen, they're still in that application pool down the road. How is that going to work, and why did you feel like that was an important change to be making to this process?
Well, in the past, it was an annual nomination. And if you nominated somebody and they didn't get it, you had to nominate them again. And really, we found there was a fatigue factor that came into play there. After the second or the third time, maybe people stopped nominating their friends or their family members. It was just maybe too gruesome to see somebody up for an award and not get it. So we're going to leave these nominations in the pool, if you will, for a 5-year period. Doesn't mean that people can't continue to add to it. You might nominate somebody and then tell your friends next year, hey, we need 5 more people to nominate someone, and let's just keep filling the bucket. But the nominations will stay alive for 5 years.
And what is the selection process? I know is in November, correct? Is that?
Yeah, the nominations will end October 15th. We already have a date picked, October 30th, for the committee to get together and select the winner. And then it's just reviewing all the nominations. And it's grueling because there really shouldn't be one winner. There should be 10. But we have to get it down to 1.
Pat, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Absolutely. Remember, firstcitizenaward.org.
Got it. All right. That will do it for us on this week's episode of Capital Connection. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week. For Capital Connection, I'm Cole Hank.